Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Comic Source Podcast. As you can tell by the video intro, we've been taken over by a bad idea once again. It's my pleasure to welcome to the show for the first time as a bad idea creator. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, the first interview as a bad idea creator.
Definitely. I mean, I don't even know if I've been on here ever.
Well, no, I mean, you've been on our show. We've talked.
Certainly.
Well, it's Joshua Dysart, everybody. If you didn't recognize him, didn't recognize the voice, if you're just listening, if you're on YouTube checking us out and you've never seen his face, look at that handsome devil. Look at him.
We have to acknowledge this zit that I have. Look at this.
That just means you're human, man.
I'm youthful. Still getting zits at 50 years old. I really went after it too, as you can tell. I didn't. No.
Yeah,
no mercy.
The big 5-0 that just happened recently, right?
It has not happened yet. June 21st, longest day of the year. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. So actually, wait a second. Let me just check my calendar. Wait, that's Sunday, right?
Yes, it's happening.
So that is the day that this is going out. So everybody, if you're listening to this,
it's on my 50th birthday. I've been saying I've been 50 since I was 48, though, to be quite fair.
So everybody, pause the video or pause the audio, whatever you're listening. Jump on Twitter, wish Josh a happy 50th.
And sing my ass happy birthday.
That's right. And I will also say, and I firmly believe this, that age is just a number and you're only as old as you feel. And yeah, Josh, you are a very youthful man, I must say.
Awesome. There are parts of me that feel 50. I'll be honest with you. Yeah, but I appreciate you saying that.
There's parts of me that feel 100, but you still have the verve and the energy. So
I love it.
First time doing an interview as a bad idea creator. First time talking about your project.
Yes, dude. They just announced it today.
Yeah,
it's like a whole thing.
We're recording this, everybody, on the 17th. Bad Idea just announced all the books that are coming. The Final 5, hashtag Final 5. Hope you all got your Final 5 sticker. Hope you pre-ordered. You're going to want that sticker if you're able to grab one. Now, in the interest of full disclosure, Josh and I think we talked about this at dinner, I want to say like 2008, maybe it was 2019, WonderCon.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
Yeah. So it's been in the works for a while, and I want to dig into it as much as we can. Obviously, we don't want to spoil. But before we get to that, why don't you give everybody kind of the elevator pitch? What is Odinn's Eye to you? What is the story all about?
Well, first of all, I have to say this is the very first conversation I've had in public about it. So if my messaging is a little weird and rusty on this thing, I don't really know. I've never really given the elevator pitch before. So this is the first time for it. So let's roll. So basically, in a Norse culture in the 6th century, a little girl with who has a seizure disorder, who is prone to having seizures, believes that she's receiving messages from Wodan. And this should be called Wodan's Eye, but I lost that battle with the editorial. So she's receiving messages from what is Odinn in the oldest spelling of Odinn. And the village eventually comes around to believing her, and she is sent on a quest to discover what exactly her mission is. And by the end of the first issue, not to spoil anything, but she comes to realize that her mission is to acquire the eye that Odinn gave up for either wisdom or poetry, depending on the translation you're interested in. And so now she's got to find a way to go from the realm of mortals and travel to find Odinn's eye. That's the high elevator pitch, but frankly, the book is something else entirely. But I'll leave that for readers to discover. But that's the way we get you in the.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm very curious about, because in seeing some of the art that you showed me, and just the feel of it, obviously a lot of roots in Norse mythology with Odin and the eye and what have you, but I very much got this sort of Western feel,
Yeah.
like,
There's a lot of Sergio Leone on my
right.
personal soundtrack
Yeah.
of yeah.
So, things like Dirty Dozen, like getting together a group to go on a quest and trying to solve it, and that sense of independence that the American West sort of, engenders in people, which to me is so disparate from the idea of North, and Northern mythology, where everything is sort of about togetherness. And so, I mean, is that something that you were looking to explore? Was it just your different influences coming together? Like, talk to us about like coming up with this idea of the story and what has influenced it. I mean, long time coming. You've been working on this for a long time.
Yeah, man. Well, and we got the last script like done and in the can by 2019. So it has been quite some time. Uh, uh, I'm not really one to speak on this too much. I'm not super educated on this, but I think you could make an argument that Western individualism is definitely found in Norse culture. But we don't know a whole lot about this period of Norse history, right? This is about 536 AD. So we don't really have a very firm grasp or firm understanding of exactly what this culture was. What we would, by any modern standards, what we would call the Vikings, which is a little bit of a misnomer. My understanding is that Viking is more of a verb than a noun, but that culture that we identify as that in a modern sense, that's like 200 years after our story is taking place. So this is, for lack of a better term, this is a proto-Viking or a pre-Viking culture. And we don't know a whole lot about their faith system. We don't even know if it was a faith system. We do know that their stories come out of the same tradition as the Indo-European migration. So there's this series of stories that, depending on the sociologists you read, whether they're religions or they're something else entirely that we don't fully grasp their relationship to these stories, but they come out of this Indo-European migration out of South Asia. And they tend to have a world tree. They tend to have a one-eyed father who is nailed to that tree, and you can call that person an all-father. You can Lord of, I mean, there's 1,000 names for this person. So we have a lot of gray area to work with, right? And this is not answering your question about the Western versus what we perceive as Norse mythology, but this is something that's really interesting to me. So we have a lot of gray area to work with in this belief system. We don't really approach it the same way I think traditional attacks on Norse mythology do. And because we have this open-ended world to work in, and because we don't feel that bound to any historical or to much historical accuracy, it really does allow us to transpose our favorite tropes about the quest and the individualism onto these things. And that's where this very almost really, to be frank, either a John Ford or maybe even a spaghetti Western idea of the big, broad, open quest comes in. And because she is a person, a real, a human being, her attempts to enter into the realms of gods it's difficult. So it's a very human quest. And then slowly we change that tone. But what you have seen is art from the very first issue. And that issue is very much couched in sort of almost a historical drama as opposed to a fantasy epic. But it gets there, I promise. Yeah, I just kind of wandered around your question.
No, I get exactly what you're saying. So let me kind of just, to put a period on the sentence. Choosing to go to this place, choosing to go to this world where there's gray area, which I know you love to live in the gray area because it's so interesting to explore and it gives you a lot of freedom, creatively. That's what I'm trying to say.
Creatively.
Yeah,
I like that.
I haven't even had much of my whistle pig yet. But critically, it gives you
You're drinking and I am not. We
it.
should correct that somehow.
Yeah. So I mean, is that what made you choose to go to this time period? Just your interest in it and knowing that creatively it gave you the freedom to tell the story you wanted to tell, or was there something else involved in that decision?
Well, I'll be really honest. The time period was brought to me by Warren. You know, I do not think the world needed another Norse mythology story. I love Norse mythology, but look, man, everything from J.R. Tolkien to Game of Thrones, the whole Western fantasy canon is Norse mythology. That's all it is. And I wasn't thrilled to play in that environment. And like so many times when I worked with Warren, he drags me into a place where I don't instinctually want to go. And then I get there and then it gets really, really interesting because I work so hard to find out a way to make it fresh for me personally, you know?
Right.
So that's why I think that even though we're probably one of a multitude of books about Norse culture and Norse mythology that will drop this year, I do think that we have a unique and fresh lens on it, like a new take on it. So to answer your question, you know, it's an old process for Warren and I, right? Warren comes at me and he says, I think it would be cool if we did something like this. And I'm like, I don't know. But he's the editor and he wins. And then I start working on it. And then I get intellectually turned on by some new take or some new spin that we can do. So that's how we got here.
Yeah. And I do want to talk a little bit about the way you work, talk about your process. I'm curious if it's changed at all, if you've managed to become more efficient. I know you sort of curse your own process. I've heard you talk about it so many times, just, you know, vomiting out all this stuff. And then it comes to, got to cut. But here's the thing about, and part of what I love about your work and what I think makes it so special and makes it stand out is you absorb so much creative content, whether it's, you know, a lot of film, books, you know, TV shows, and just you absorb
comics,
life experience. You know, you're very active and involved, and I think you pull all that in, and then when you go to create, you're in a way you've taken all that in and you've sort of processed it subconsciously, and then you kind of, you know, put it all out there and then do the pruning, kind of like a bonsai tree, right? Like,
yes.
And then you've got to. So was it any easier this time? I mean, how are you getting faster, or is it still just got to put in the work?
This was not only not easier this time, this is one of the hardest things that we have done. And I think it's because this was my first time to work directly with Warren in a long time. This was my first book after the Valiant stuff. I had done, I had done Goodnight Paradise. But when I came into making this book, I had already, before we decided on the subject matter or anything, I decided I wanted to do something really big and really epic. It had been a while. I didn't know how long it was going to be. Now here we are in 2021 and I haven't dropped a book since 2018. I did not expect it to go that long, but I had already felt when we started Odinn's Eye that it had been a long time since I dropped a book, and I didn't want to drop something that was by the numbers or that just did what the pitch, what the elevator pitch said it should do. I really wanted to flex my concepts of storytelling. And what that led us to was a very arduous process of trying to figure out what this book was supposed to be, what its voice is supposed to be. But I think that it is probably one of the most literary and thematically dense books that I've ever done, because of that. But honestly, the next book I did for Bad Idea, which hasn't been announced yet, that book came way more easily. Like, I got this out of my system. But this was the book that was, if I can use like scatological metaphor here, this was the book that was hard to pass. It didn't come out easily. This was the book that stretched.
Yeah, well, I
I'm
mean,
not gonna say it. Stretched my
yeah,
asshole.
yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, and unfortunately, since Bad Idea is coming to an end, maybe we'll see your other project, maybe not. I guess we.
Oh yeah, I forgot about.
Guess we'll have
Yes.
to wait and see.
Shit. Fuck. This is why Dinesh
Everybody right
never
now is like,
wants me.
yeah, they're
We
all
should just
groaning.
cut that out. That book will probably be published somewhere else, some other way. I'm
Yeah,
sure.
maybe you can crowdfund it.
Yeah, exactly.
So, so let's talk a little bit more about what a challenge this one was. Because I get what you're saying, and it's part of, I think, what I want to talk about in a little bit in terms of coming to Bad Idea and having more freedom. Because I mean, you guys built rebuilt the universe at Valiant, and you certainly had a big hand in that with Toyo Harada and Harbinger and what have you. And there was a lot of freedom, but I think not the way. I mean, you owed nothing here to anything, right? Like you could, other than, hey, pull from Norse mythology, you could tell any story you wanted. So, no, I mean, Valiant didn't have a lot, but there were certain rules and limitations and, being true to the universe or what have you. But here it wasn't that. So, in having that challenge of wanting to figure out, okay, what is the book going to be? How do we get there? How do we make it epic? In terms of your actual process, like, was it the same? Was it just going to, a coffee shop or whatever and just, well, I guess you couldn't, well, you finished before the pandemic. So
yeah, we finished this book before. Yeah.
So was it just that same process though of just getting the story down and then pruning, or did you go about it a different way this time with different framework and working so closely with Warren?
So the first thing you were talking about were the inherent limitations of of like working inside of the Valiant universe.
Right.
And you are correct when you say that those limitations were never felt like imposed by editorial. They were more personal limitations that we just understood. I mean, occasionally editorial would impose some sort of like a marketing gimmick that would impact the narrative, but we understood. And also, it was honestly, it was much easier to create a Valiant book because we understood what we were doing there. We had a previous template. Mm-hmm. Shooter in Lapham in regards to Harbinger, Shooter and Lapham had laid out a groundwork, and some of that groundwork was dated and needed to be tossed out, and some of it was amazing and needed to be elevated, or just left alone. And so, and we knew the audience, that there was already an audience for those Valiant books, so serving that audience wasn't very difficult. We just had to kind of look, see what they liked. And then we had a personal idea about what these books should be. We may have bucked a few superhero trends, but we still wanted to make great superhero comics,
right.
In our way. But Odinn's Eye there was no, it could be, like you said, it could be absolutely anything that we wanted it to be. And so
I would think as a creator, that would be a little intimidating. Like,
it's like terrifying.
Staring at that blank page. Okay, now what?
Yeah, I mean, that's a huge part of what the struggle was, right? Was like, I wanted it to be really good. And I was at a place in my life, talk about turning 50. I really do believe, and I really do believe that I had my own kind of midlife crisis at the time we were making this book, that I wanted to do something really, really important and interesting and different than anything I'd done before. I didn't want to do anything I'd done before. I didn't want to do the social realism comics. I didn't want to do superhero comics. And so I think I was in the middle of a midlife crisis. And so that didn't help either, right? Because instead of buying like a Corvette and trying to like date a horrible person half my age, I instead put it all into, this is going to be my greatest work. And that is not pressure you should put on yourself.
Right.
It was a very, very difficult thing. So yeah, so that all played into it a great deal. It was, so to answer your question, it was much easier to make those Valiant comics than it was to make this comic. Oh, but you also had another part of your question about the process, about the pruning and everything.
Yeah.
I still do that. I don't know how not to do it. I'm more of a sculptor in many ways at parts of my process than anything else. A sculptor has to bring in the stone into their studio, and it's this big hulking massive stone, and then they have to start picking at it until they find the shape that they want, or that the stone speaks to them or whatever. And for me, all these concepts and ideas that I have, and they can be conflicting. They conflict with one another. I mean, they can be, have no place in this kind of narrative. I mean, there's just a huge load of a conceptual load that I drop, and that's me bringing the rock in. And then I have to start the very arduous process of like whittling it down into something. And, that's why my stuff is always so dense. And I don't know if I don't mean that dense is better. I don't think it is, honestly, but that's just I don't know. I don't know how else to write comic books. I haven't figured out another way.
It's so interesting too, because your process to me feels more like what I hear artists talk about, especially artists that are very detailed, like a Gary Frank or a Liam Sharp. Liam, I talk to him all the time, and he'll talk about sometimes, especially digitally, he's sometimes, now that I'm working digitally, I have to be careful because now I can zoom in and go and just lose myself in the details for 2 hours, and then by the time it's printed, you're not even going to see that. So why am I wasting my time?
I could totally see Liam doing that too. Yeah. You can look at his art and see that that's a tendency in him. Yeah,
exactly. And so his whole thing, and I hear this from other artists too, it's like, okay, when do I say enough is enough and stop fiddling with it? Your writing process seems to be kind of similar. Do you ever face that challenge? Like, and is that where Warren steps in as editor and says, okay, has to be good enough. We need to move on?
Yeah, I mean, deadlines are really, really important. And one of the reasons why you haven't seen a lot of creator-owned work from me is a lack of belief in myself, to be honest, fear and self-doubt. But also because if I don't have a deadline or an editor, then I can be really, I can really obsess on minutia. I'm getting to a point now where I'm starting to find people that I am, that I would like to employ to play the part that Warren plays when we make comics at Bad Idea or Valiant or wherever else we'll go over the course of our collaborative relationship. But yeah, that's exactly right. Warren is the one that says, look, you got to turn this in. Warren is the one that provides the deadlines. I always miss a deadline, but I come pretty close to it, more or less. Like I have a deadline tomorrow, and Warren doesn't know that that's not happening, So, but yeah, that's what it is. Otherwise, I mean, I'm a novelist at heart, I mean, everything would be 1,000 pages.
Right. Everything is War and Peace.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. What a pretentious way to be. It's like terrible.
That would just be fantastic. I mean, if Bad Idea wasn't ending though, that would just be awesome. Like just to spring it on retailers, they order the book and it shows up and it's like 1,200 pages.
Like, man, it would be so amazing. I so envy, like, I really love, if you look at my book, you can't really tell from this angle, but most of the comics, these are all comics behind me. Most of the comics in my life are these just huge, epic, voluminous, that's what I love. I don't really, never was much of a pamphlet kid,
Well, you did mention that I got to see some art from the first issue, and you talked about wanting to do something different than you've ever done before. And I very much got, with the limited little amount that I saw, I very much did get that feel. It's one of the first thoughts that struck me. It's like, this looks so different than anything Josh has done before. You mentioned the music, and you do get that sort of Western feel, and then with the description about maybe some influence from Western. And we also saw the words, is it a five issue battle hymn?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, poetry is a big part of the way that Norse culture, I mean, this came later, but we're not being super historically accurate with our book, so we're not too worried about it. But poetry and meter was a big part of the way the Norse people told their stories. So that's a cultural thing. Yeah.
Well, but the other part of it is that it looks so action-packed to me, and not to say that some of your stuff, especially Imperium, wasn't filled with action. Life and Death of Toyo Harada as well. but it really feels like from what I've seen of this story, you're elevating that. But I know you, Josh. There's got to be, and that's great. We're all for action. I know you. There's got to be some theme. There's got to be some idea, some underline, and maybe you want people to figure it out for yourself, and that's perfectly fine if that's how.
Oh no, I'll talk about theme all day.
There's got to be something, and obviously I haven't read any of it, so I don't know what it is that's there to be explored. But you said yourself earlier, Warren bringing you this idea, and you weren't sure about, do we need another, comic about Norse mythology? But then you found something there.
Yeah.
That interested you. So talk a little bit about some of the things that, if you want, that you are going to explore. And you don't have to give it all away, because
sure.
I'm going to read it and then make you come back on and talk to me for 2 more hours about what I got out of it. But talk a little bit about some of the things that you hope to start a dialogue about with the readers, whether that's an actual dialogue like you and I, or whether it's an internal dialogue for those that are reading it.
I mean, look, it's always exciting to see what other people think of your work, but I am a solipsistic asshole. So I'm going to tell you what I think of my work first. To me, the book is about, it's about reality and belief, and about how the latter, belief, impacts and changes the former, reality. And so that's really what it was about. And when I started to do research into, because Warren was interested in a Viking book, and I started to do research into Norse mythology and saw that we have a little bit of a better understanding of the Vikings. And again, I'm using that word in the most modern sense. I'm sure there's someone who knows a lot about this history who can tell that I'm misusing this term, but we all know what we're talking about. We're talking about that period from about 9th century to let's say 12th century or whatever, where Norse pirates basically changed the politics and the landscape of a lot of regions around Europe. And so because of that, because there's so much interaction between the Viking culture and other cultures at that time, we have a relatively strong understanding of how they viewed Odinn, their belief systems,
right?
If we could call them that. I became really interested in proto-belief systems, that point before we know anything about what they believed. And so once I started messing around in that space, then I grew up religious. I was raised, I was born and baptized a Catholic, and then raised in a white Southern Baptist culture. And now I identify as an atheist, but I find belief and faith in the inherent human need for spirituality really, really, really fascinating. And I find the way that the things that we believe, for better or for worse, how they make the world around us really, really, really interesting. And, whether you believe that God is real or not, God is real, because so many people believe in it and it impacts culture and it impacts society. And so those are all, once I began to realize we were working in sort of a really nebulous space about what a culture believed and how they enacted those beliefs, then I got really, really interested. So that's what it really is, a story about belief and about how belief changes reality.
Yeah, I think it's completely fascinating too. You talk about, whether God as a supernatural being exists or not, and we can debate that all day.
Sure.
People do. But in terms of God as a concept, 100% exists. You can't argue that.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. Yeah. As does all kinds of,
right.
For lack of a better term, like deity notions or deist notions. Yeah.
The other thing that's interesting, and you wrote this long before the madness that was 2020, is you talk about, you're talking about belief in terms of believing something that's larger than ourselves, and how it does impact, in faith systems. And, The argument could be made that the concept of a Christian God has caused more harm in this world than it. You talk about wars started, crusades,
Mm-hmm.
just
Mm-hmm.
the horrors committed in his name. But you can also look at what has happened politically and societally in this country in terms of what people believe, whether it's real or not, and how that impacts. And so
Yes.
there's so many layers when you start talking about belief. And I mean, let's face it, belief is something that is in a way hard to define because it's not something that's concrete. It's not something that's solid, and different people think of it in different ways, and people have different beliefs. So it's something that's so nebulous and hard to nail down, and yet it does have so many real world consequences, whether that be sending people on a crusade in the Middle Ages or people choosing not to get a vaccine because they think it magnetizes you.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we're talking about a really big concept. Should we expect any answers, or do you think that it's important in this book just to start the conversation?
Yeah, I mean, I don't. It seems like lately, and readers haven't seen it yet, but they will over the course of multiple projects as time goes on and things become released. I think people will find more and more me creating fictions where some kind of God or some kind of belief is real. And it's not because I believe that. It's because I've just gotten to a place where I want to manifest something, out there. And so, so this story is going to be about that. Like everything else I write, it's like not just about the characters going through their own struggle with what they believe and what is real and what is not real. In the guise of a massive fantasy book. Let's not, I don't want to undersell this. This book is the closest thing to epic fantasy that I've ever written. And it owes a lot to early 20th century pulp stuff. It owes a lot to Conan the Barbarian. It owes a lot to John Carter of Mars. It owes, right? But at the same time, it's sort of about me trying to create a world in which, and I think fantasy narratives are great for this, a world in which there is a God or there is something. And that's comforting and it's interesting and it's maybe less somehow chaotic, I guess. And fantasy narratives lend themselves to that. They're filled with gods and who are real and all this stuff. So that's really kind of what interested me when Morn and I decided we were going to start writing a fantasy book together was, more than any other genre, fantasy allows us to make God real. And what is that like? So I think I forget your question.
Just in terms of we're talking about exploring these ideas and starting the conversation. Do you feel that the book provides answers, or do you think
right,
start the conversation?
No, I never provide any answers. I don't know the answers. How am I supposed to put them in the comic book? I mean, that is the question. That is the question I was answering. I thought I wandered off in a tangent, but in fact, I mean, I don't want to say any. I want the readers to have their own experience with the book, right, and to come away from the book believing their own concepts and ideas. I will never ever, let's not say that. I will try my best to never be didactic and preachy, but I've probably failed at that before. But there will always be there will always be a mystery. There will always be space for the reader to believe what they want to believe. So in that regard, there aren't answers. However, this new turn in my work towards trying to create a God or gods in my work, that's closer to giving answers than I probably ever have before. And also in finding that to be like a kind of a way towards a happy ending. Oh, God's real. Cool.
Happy ending.
Happy ending.
Dysart book? What are you crazy?
No. I'm already saying too much.
No, but I love that because it's funny to hear. So because you're the creator and these are your stories. From a reader standpoint, I always feel like, no, you're not telling us what you think the answer is. But I always feel like you lead us down the path to where anybody with a half a brain in their head would realize the answer is sort of self-evident. At least
that's really interesting because I don't know the answers. Like I feel like I hope that what I've tried to do in the work is ask really interesting questions, and then sort of like see how it plays out. But I don't know anything,
Maybe I shouldn't say that you lead us to the answer so much as you lead us to the awareness of the fact that we need to change and find the answer.
Yeah.
I always go back to for me, your work, Toyo, is always what I think is the best thing you've ever done because of all the reasons we've talked about. We're not going to rehash them here because we'll go on forever. But just that idea, of the haves and the have-nots, and there's so much work that still needs to be done, and somehow starting that story in 2012, it somehow has become more relevant than ever in the last couple of years.
I guess we talked about that. For people watching this, Jace and I had dinner a few weeks ago, and we talked about this. I think I could write Toyo Harada forever. I mean, there's always a new struggle and problem with democracy. There's always a new struggle and problem with anti-democracy, and there's and Toyo Harada can embody so many beautiful and ugly things about humanity, about wealth, class, and power structures in general, that it would never get old writing Toyo Harada. It would never get old. So they had to rip him from my grasp. But
yeah. So I'm very curious to see, as you move on into this new phase of your career. I'm very curious to see, because I have a feeling a lot of those things they're going to be there subtextually. I think that you can't help yourself.
Yeah. I mean, these are the things I'm fascinated with, and it's in me. And I want to be a writer who, like, I mean, the audience, I work hard to make sure the audience has a good time, but they're kind of secondary. I mean, in a way, the first person I'm doing this for is myself. I'm trying to reveal myself to myself. So if I'm off just writing something that isn't like pouring out of me like in a passionate way, then what am I learning about myself?
Right.
So I'm in the back half of my life now. I got to learn some shit about myself. So so it will always be that way. But I do think that I do think I'm going to be submerging this stuff a little bit deeper into the work, going more into genre. I really love doing that social realism stuff, like Goodnight Paradise and Unknown Soldier, and the World Food Program stories, which, by the way, WFP won the Nobel Peace Prize. Yeah. So being a part of that was exciting, even though the Nobel Peace Prize has been given to a lot of assholes. But so I really love that stuff, and I might get back to it eventually because I like real world stories, but for the time being, I'm going to start looking more to genre. And I think I'm getting older, and I'm looking back at the things that really excited, like 14-year-old Josh. Yeah. And I'm wondering if there's a way that 50-year-old Josh and 14-year-old Josh can hang out and make comic books together. So I'm getting better at that.
Yeah, well, I'm all for it. And like I said, the first time I saw this art, I'm like, well, this is something different. And I can't wait to check it out, because that'll be the fun, right, is as a reader, enjoying the story, going along, checking it out at that surface level, and then finding what themes you wanted to explore. And now we're going to have a third level with the subtextual stuff, where I'm going to look and kind of read in, and then we'll have something else interesting to talk about. The whole idea of pulling from, all these different inspirations, and, you mentioned Conan, and, you can't talk about fantasy without talking about Tolkien, and this idea of this big quest and bringing people together. Whether it's the Dirty Dozen, Sergio Leone, or whether it's the Fellowship of the Ring. And that's another thing that I think your fans, people that love your work, really enjoy. You know, you did it in Harbinger, you did it in Imperium, and that's, you know, bringing these ensemble characters together around a central character and making them quirky and making them unique, and then playing with the character dynamics and how they interact with the main character and how they interact with each other. So can you give us any clues to some of these other supporting characters that we're going to have on Solveig? Is that how you pronounce her name?
Solvi, I believe, is the pronunciation, but maybe we'll have a Nordic person correct us. But I believe it's Solveig or Solveig. I think it's I believe. Well, first of all, let me say I love building teams. And that more than almost anything else, that might be the real influence of me reading comics as a young person. You know, I love making characters, whether they're realistic characters or hyper-realistic characters or pulp characters. I love making them, and I love imbibing them with real human traits to the best of my abilities. And then, but I can never really shake off the idea of the team coming together. Right. You know, I just love it. I just love it. I love it when it happens in movies. I love it in comics. I love the team coming together. And it's really interesting that you say that. And I really want the book to be a surprise for people. And, you know, I don't want to talk about a lot of stuff, but this book is it plays a different hand than what you're being sold. And it's not what it walks and talks like in the beginning. And this idea of building a team is going to be a kind of reoccurring, evolving thing inside of the book. And I know that's super vague, but I want it to be surprising. So to that end, I will talk about the people that you will meet in issue 1, and the roles that they'll ostensibly serve at that point. You'll meet Solveig, a young girl who's prone to seizures and prone to visions and prone to real belief in things that maybe other people only have kind of a passing belief to, a bit of a fanatic perhaps. You'll meet the steadfast warrior who's been assigned by the local chieftain to protect her and take her north. You'll meet the vulva, or for lack of a better term, let's call her a witch for now, who sees in her belief and is either manipulating her for her own gain. Maybe, you know, what this character, her name is Valletta, which is a very old name. There's a long line in history, there's a long line of, for lack of a better term, kind of Norse witches, witches is not the right word. They're women of great power with tremendous influence in the community. And Valletta has a long line of that throughout history. And so this is kind of our trio, right? That will go north, further north, because they live in the north. And they will be surrounded by a group of warriors assigned by the chieftain to travel north and protect this little girl, this fragile thing. And the further north they go, the more civilization as they understand it falls away, and the more surreal and different the world becomes, and the less reality and grounding exists. And in this way, I'm also very influenced by Going After Cacciato, which is written by Tim O'Brien, which is a novel about the Vietnam War that starts in a very realistic place and then becomes more and more surreal as they take a journey. And it's always been a really big work for me. And so I'm sort of leaning on that for that aspect of the narrative. But those three characters, the warrior, the witch, and the seer, the child seer, and the warriors that are protect them, those are that's a stepping stone to something else. So yeah. And when I say something else, I mean new characters, new ideas of allegiances, new concepts in team building. So yeah, but you were correct to say the team building is that's that. I love it. I love doing it.
And it's got that epic feel.
Yeah, it always feels good to have people come together for a larger task, and I like to draw that out. Like in Imperium, having the whole first arc be a collection of the team, like in Harbinger, having the whole that second arc really being sort of each team member gets a voice.
Right.
I love that. I think it's really character driven, and that's what makes me happy.
We're getting, here's the other thing about it, right? Because it's completely finished and had been for a long time, we're getting it weekly, which I think is amazing. 5 issues, 32 pages each, except the first issue it's not double size. It's not 64 pages. It's 72 pages.
That makes me so happy. And I mean, I obviously have to watch what I say here. I don't want, we have the best. I mean, a lot of people talk a lot of shit about Bad Idea. We have the best marketing team on the planet. I mean, people are talking about us because we have the best, craziest,
right.
most like kamikaze marketing team on the planet. So I definitely don't want to undercut anything they have to say. But yeah. So and there's things I need to figure out with editorial, but basically, yes, that first issue is going to be like 78 pages. It's ostensibly 2 chapters, 2 verses in the hymn, as it were, in the poem. So it's going to be huge and epic, and that's what I love. I mean, this is the thing. I'm so right now, comics is in this place where, for very viable reasons, for just economic pragmatics, we're mostly making very short miniseries, and I get it. I mean, I know that, I understand why we do that, but I just hate it. I like epics. I want something to be big. I want a lot of pages. I want a lot of story. I want room, because look, when you condense a story, the very first thing you're going to lose are the small moments, the character moments,
right.
the glances between people. That's what you lose, so that you can make sure that the plot sticks together. And the plot is the least interesting thing to me. The small glances between people are the most interesting thing to me. So I like it. I like room to stretch. That's how we make them feel like real people, when we have room to stretch.
Well, yeah, it goes back to what I was saying about your team building, putting the teams together, and the interpersonal relationships between those teams and how they relate to each other. And yeah, you're right. That's the stuff that falls away to keep the backbone of the story.
Yeah, because there's like 99 plots. That's like it. You'd be even hard pressed to pick 99 original stories that exist. So if that's the case, then why are we so plot obsessed? Why don't we think more about why don't we think more about character? Why don't we think more about like emotion? Why don't we think more? So yeah.
Yeah, I remember taking an English class in college where the professor was, maybe it was 7 or 9. He's like, there's only like 7 or 9 like true narratives, and everything else is built off of that. It's actually a very small number.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, Vonnegut has this thing. You can watch this video on YouTube where Kurt Vonnegut talks about story shapes, and he's like, "There's only like 4 story shapes," and you go, it's exactly.
Everything plays off of that. Well, the other way that this book is feeling epic, and if you're watching it on YouTube, you'll see it here over my shoulder. You got Tomas Giorello doing the
oh my God, yes.
So talk a little bit. Like when Worm brought you this idea, did you say, okay, Thomas is going to do it? Like, when did you know he was on the book? And talk a little bit about the collaboration and how his art is just, I mean, it's amazing.
I don't even remember the first. That also might have been why it was so hard to write, was because sometimes you get an artist that's so good, and you want to be as good as that artist, right? You want to deserve that artist, and B, you want to push that artist so that they're drawing things that they love, they're happy, they're not miserable. You want to make them have fun, and but you want to make sure they're drawing things that are both that they're excellent at, but also that the reader hasn't seen from them yet. It's a really tricky thing, and it can really freeze you up. But when I wrote the one and only script I ever got to write for Richard Corbin, I totally froze up. And I had to move like a blind man through that script just to get it done, just to get it in, because I thought, well, I would rather quit comics than write a script for Richard Corbin. Wow. So, but I didn't. I stuck with it, and for better or for worse. And that's kind of the way you felt about Tomas Giorello. And I don't really Tomas. I'm sorry. And I don't really Tomas. I don't really know when I knew that Tomas was the artist. I forget now because it's a while back. Been a while. But I do know that, like always, I was first. I never am happy, ever. So at first I'm like, is this right? Is this what we want to do? Then the pages come in, the first pages come in, and then you're like, oh, well, now I'm not good enough. Right. Now it's like, shouldn't this guy be drawing somebody else's book? Like, what? How was this happen? So then it becomes harder because you really want to make Tomas happy, and you really want to give Tomas something to draw that he's gonna put all of his love and passion in, and that impacts the story. And that's one of the things I don't mind about comics is like, and one of the things that makes it so frustrating when you don't know who you're writing for, artist wise, because if you know who your artist is, you can really write to that artist's strengths, and so that's So that's what we did, and I believe that Tomas is turning in some of the best work of his career. And I wrote this. I wrote at Tomas. I wrote to Tomas. I wrote for Tomas. That's because I knew it.
Yeah, and I'm if you're watching on YouTube, everybody, I'm sharing a couple of the preview pages that Bad Idea released today with the press release. You can see what Josh is talking about here with kind of the action and over the top. But then, when you talk about Tomas's art and how he nails it with the emotion in the faces and the kind of the action scenes, how kinetic they are. But then we get to a quieter moment, like we were just talking about.
I love this page.
I mean, look at that.
I love this page.
Look at the expression on her face. I mean, there's no dialogue here, obviously, but you know what's going on. You can read everything you need to know in those facial expressions.
Gosh, it almost makes you want to not put dialogue on it, doesn't it? God.
Yeah, it's amazing. Now, Diego Rodriguez does the colors.
Yes.
It's a little bit of a muted palette, and it very much suits kind of the tone of the story we're talking about here: Norse mythology, fantasy, epic.
He does an amazing job.
Yeah, it's absolutely incredible. But I will say this, however, and I would never second guess Dinesh or Warren.
The purples.
And I know Bad Idea is not going to collect any, or they said they weren't going to collect anything. Maybe now that they're ending, they will. But you and I had talked about maybe going black and white for Tomas.
Oh, well, I mean,
I would love to see like an artist proof of this story, like a hardback in just black and white, because if you get a chance to see some of the black and white images, and maybe when it gets closer, it might be shared by Bad Idea or whatnot, or maybe Josh can throw some of the stuff up on Twitter. Be sure you're following him. Yeah, I mean the black and white pages are stunning. They're so good. The line work is amazing.
And maybe and Tomas, obviously, maybe he might post some stuff. I will say, I told you I wasn't going to post it, but then in my excitement, I posted it today. I cut together a fan trailer. I'm the fan who cut it together. I cut together a fan trailer. It's not official promotion, but I did that as the art was still coming in. And you can see that they're low grade TIFFs that I cut with. I was just doing it for myself in my own time. And but it does give you a little bit of a sense of what Tomas's black and white art is like. And I've already shared that at my Twitter. I can give it to you to put on this podcast, or I think I already sent it to you, or people can come to my Twitter and see it. I don't know how long I'll leave it up. It's, it's like I said, it's not official promotion, but it is an opportunity to look at Tomas's art. I'm not in love with my edit. There's a few things I could change. But
all right. So if you're listening to this on the day it comes out, everybody, I'll put a link in the show notes.
Yeah.
To that trailer. Maybe Josh has taken it down already. Maybe he hasn't.
I have not.
Maybe if you're listening to this in July, he's taken it down. So
that's right.
Go to the show notes, click on the link, and maybe you'll get to see something cool. If not, I'm sorry. I apologize. Blame Josh.
Or maybe it'll be a better edit.
Or
maybe I'll find time to recut it.
Yeah, and then I'll get the new link and put it in the show.
Yeah, and I'll keep it the black and white stuff because because it's not official promotion or anything.
Yeah, it's fantastic. So I can't wait to read this. And I'm going to read it all with you all. Bad Idea doesn't do like press previews or anything like that. So unless I can steal Dinesh's phone, I'll be enjoying it with all of you, and we'll cover it on Bad Idea Takeover Sundays as always. So best of luck with it, Josh. I really can't wait to get my hands on it. But let's talk a little bit about Bad Idea itself. I mean, I know, and we talked about this at dinner the other night, you don't know much about like the marketing and all that.
Right. You're going to get very little from me. Yeah. I would like, if Josh Johns or Dinesh is watching this, I'm going to do my best, and they're going to get very little from me.
What I want to know about, is, okay, Valiant's done. You're not doing any stuff over there, in terms of the people that you worked with over there. Dinesh is gone, Warren is gone. Yeah. And sort of Valiant as we know it is pivoted. Mm-hmm. And so then Dinesh picks up the phone and calls you and says, hey, I got this crazy idea. We all love making comics together. Do you want to come and make more comics? Like, how did you find out about it? And what was your thought when they said, yeah, we're going to just as many pages as you need, and, one per person and that, like, how much did you know? What were your thoughts? How were you approached?
It is not however many pages you need. Well, I definitely pushed it. I pushed it.
Reason.
I pushed it.
You can't make that 1,200 page comic yet, Josh.
I know. Apparently not. Well, look, I'm going to censor myself a little bit on this. I don't know how much of this needs to be in the public record, but, look, Dinesh and I and Warren and I, we're not just, we're not just like professional colleagues. I'm friends with them. So there was a period where Dinesh was out at Valiant, and he and I were meeting and hanging out and going to dinner and going to the bar and just shooting the shit and not working together. So we were always working together, but not in comics. I mean, we're always talking about pitches and story ideas to each other and what could happen. And over, when he was kind of discussing things about, it's pretty obvious if you're friends with Dinesh that the movie and TV space is interesting, but the comic book space is where his heart lies, and that's really what he wants to do, is make comics. So it's only a matter of time before Dinesh starts making comics again. I mean, it's in his nature, So we were always talking about it and always seeing what was going to go on. But Dinesh is also good, even though I consider myself a friend. He's also really good at keeping his cards close to his chest, right? Yes. As is Warren. Warren thinks he's like a Roman senator or something.
That's why he thinks he's so good at poker, and he is a pretty good poker player. But he's not as good. I'm sure he'll listen to this. Yes, I'm going on record as saying you're not as good as you think you are. I'm just saying that. You're good. You're probably better than me. Maybe not quite as good as you think you are, buddy. But anyway,
that's really funny.
I interrupted. Sorry.
Oh shit! What were you saying? Oh yeah. So basically, I knew something was coming, and I knew that I was going to be a part of it. I mean, Dinesh and Warren, they don't really have to. They don't have to sell me too hard on it. I mean, we just, I really like working with people that I like, and I like working with people who put up with me. That's always a good thing. I'm not always the easiest to work with. So, it's like family, you gotta, family's going to throw a Christmas party. You got to come to Christmas. So that's what Bad Idea is. It's family. It's coming to, it's Christmas.
Like we said, you didn't know much about the marketing stuff, but it sounded like from what you were saying earlier, I mean, you just love it. Like, it's crazy and it's wild and it gets people talking about it. And hey, you got to do something to stand out, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, look, this is not in my nature. This is why I'm not going to talk about any of that stuff because it's not in my nature. When Josh Johns and I, it's so stupid now, but when Josh Johns and I was in a pretty fragile place though. When Josh Johns first like approached me to make a video for them or something, I had like a fucking anxiety attack about the way they wanted to do things. So it's not in my nature to be quite so like bullish on the marketing front. But I think Josh is a genius, and I actually think that Hunter's a genius and Adam's a genius, and I think they did crazy. I think they're as responsible for the success at Valiant as the creators are and as editorial is, and and Valiant was a success by any measure. The amount of money that was invested to get it up and running versus the amount of money that the people walked away with at the end is, if capitalism is our measurement, then exactly. So, and so I appreciate what they're doing. I do. I could never participate in it. I could never be. There's a bit of a hucksterism that is sort of, we all love P.T. Barnum, but we can't all be P.T. Barnum. So.
Yeah, exactly. So the other part of it, and I've talked to Rob and I've talked to Matt, and they kind of echoed your sentiments of, man, it's just great to make comics that you're passionate about and you love, and you're getting to make them with your friends. They both expressed kind of a sentiment that they, we didn't get any cons last year, and even though you're not working directly, you and Rob aren't co-writing something, you're not co-writing something with Matt, Matt and Rob aren't necessarily co-writing something together, but when these conventions happen, you guys get together.
Yes.
That it's a really fertile ground for ideas. Have you missed that as well? Not being able to hang out with those guys?
Yes. I love Matt Kent. I love him. I love his family. I love his daughter. I love his wife. I love Rob, so these are, I love Louis LaRosa. I love these guys, so the idea that it's not a shared universe. We don't get to do the writers' rooms, which were, I was often, I was both productive in the writer's room and also disruptive in the writer's room, but I love them. And
hungover maybe a few times.
And so, yeah, exactly. I mean, they fly you to New York and, I don't know what to say, but, I will miss that because we don't get to create together anymore. And that was really exciting, but it will be so good to be in the same place as Matt and Rob and everybody else. And, that's good times. And, Matt had come out here. I live in Los Angeles. Matt had come out here a few times for work and I got to see him, and Rob has come out here and I saw him, and I went to, this was before pandemic, but, after Valiant, I went to Rob's cabin in the Georgia woods for the solar eclipse a few years ago. And, so any excuse to be with these guys. And and this is the thing, like, I never really felt like comics was a career. It obviously was, and it's been how I've been making my living. It's obviously a real business, and people probably get offended when I say that I never treated it that way. But I always just kind of looked at it as a way to hang out with just really cool people and make something, and that probably explains why my career is the way it is, but that's just how I looked at it.
Well, the other side of these cons is that you get to see you get to meet the fan. I mean, there's the hardcore group that, you always see.
Yeah, they're readers. I actually don't really like the word fan. They're readers. They're, fan is like a power dynamic. I don't dig it.
Fair enough. The readers, the people that are experiencing your work.
Yeah.
The ones that you've come to know personally and others that when you're doing a signing, and that's a way. And comics is a little different now with social media. You can get a little more feedback as opposed to years past. And still 12-year-old me kind of freaks out sometimes when I reach out to a creator and they a little different now that I'm pressed and I have a little more access. But yeah, I mean, I wouldn't have ever thought that I could send hey, let me just send this quick text message, written message to a creator I like, and get their response. And so that's been something you've missed as well, like being able to interact with readers and people that have enjoyed it.
Yeah, of course. It's like, but that first experience for me, because, my first ongoing was Swamp Thing. And at the time that people have said a lot of nice things lately, but at the time that was not very well received.
Right.
And I didn't really have a community be built up around that. And then after that was Unknown Soldier. And that was my first time I started to meet people that were really engaged with the work, sought me out. And that was really, really fun. But there's nothing really comparable to the Valiant the days is in that regard. You know,
right.
The Valiant readers were like super engaged, super present, showed up all the time. They were, they were definitely like a certain kind of person reads Unknown Soldier. A lot of different kinds of people read Valiant.
Mm-hmm.
It was a lot of different kinds of people, which was pretty fascinating. I do miss that. I miss, it's a bit of an, it's like you try not to let it be like too much of an ego stroke, and you try to put everyone in equal footing. That's why the word fan makes me uncomfortable. Right. But I just like people, in those conventions. I have a little bit of some social anxiety. So I need, like when I hang out with a bunch of pros that I don't know, like if it's not Matt or if it's not Jeff Lemire or somebody that I'm friends with, I have a lot of social anxiety. So I like that there's a reason for us to all be authentic with each other. Right. And I don't have to, my social anxiety doesn't flare up. Sometimes I'm in a room with like a lot of big name creators, and I just sit in a corner and stare at my feet.
Yeah, you gotta get over it. They're just people, man.
I know.
People ask, people ask me that too. Like, don't you get nervous talking to these people? I'm like, they're just people, man. They're just people. We're all more alike than different. Way more.
I'm never nervous when we start talking. I'm just nervous before we start talking.
Yeah. Well, I get that too. Because I'm an introvert by nature, which is crazy considering that I do this. But there are, especially when I was starting out, I would go for the liquid courage first.
Yes. You know what? I think I'm learning this as I get older. I feel like I'm that I too am an introvert, but that I had used like ego and false bravado to convince myself that I was an extrovert.
Right.
Because that seemed to be the way that you did shit, was you were extroverted. And so now, but I feel like that's a very late in life realization I've had.
Yeah. Well, it's not necessarily a bad thing. Keep learning, keep growing.
Yeah, man, exactly.
You don't want to ever stop. Well, I'm very curious, we're talking about readers and talking about, engagement, whether it was Swamp Thing or Unknown Soldier or certainly Valiant, the readers, the Valiant people are so invested and so engaged and care so much. So I'm very curious what audience is going to show up for.
Man, I have no idea, for Bad Idea. And it's going to be really interesting because it's going to be interesting. I mean, I believe that I can bring, I have a lot of real authentic friends. You're a friend, Jay, that I met like by doing this Valiant stuff. And I think they'll come around just because they don't even have to buy the comic. They can just come to the shows and say hi. But I don't really care about but the new reader, that's going to be super interesting. I'm very curious as to like what is, because in a really weird kind of weird social experimenty way, a marketing strategy is revealed in the readers that like come into it. You know what I mean? Like it's not super revealing to have Matt's readers and my readers and Rob's readers and Christos Gage's readers show up for us. I mean, that's super cool and I really appreciate it, but it's not going to illuminate a lot about the marketing strategy except that they got the word out. The real illumination of a marketing strategy is when new readers came to.
Exactly.
So that's going to be super cool. Yeah.
Who responded? Who's on board for a weekly epic?
Norse
tale from the imagination of Josh Dysart. And what's that dialogue going to be like when they start talking about the works amongst themselves? Like it's great when you get feedback, but I always love when they're talking about it amongst themselves, because that's where you really kind of see it unfiltered.
Yeah, because people can talk shit when I'm not in the room, and that's the real deal. But they will be less likely. Although there's a few Valiant readers that are happy to talk shit with you to your face.
Yeah,
but exactly. So yeah, I totally agree. And honestly, that's really the book doesn't live until it's read. You
Yeah.
know, that's just all there is to it.
Yeah. And by the way, when we're talking about Valiant readers that'll talk shit to your face, yes, Rucker, we're referring to you.
I like Rucker.
I love Rucker, but he'll be the first one to say that he pulls no punches.
Yeah.
But that's what I love about him. So, well, Josh, it's been great catching up, man. Thanks so much for taking the time. There's going to be a link to Josh's Twitter in the show notes, everybody. So go click there, follow him. You'll know when he has Odinn's Eye finally dropping if you want to ask him questions about process and all that kind of stuff. I'll also put a link to the YouTube video that he was referring to, so you can go check it out. Please keep in mind, rough cut. No.
Yeah, that's right. Unless I recut it, but I'm pretty lazy. Yeah. But I would like to recut it. I'm not 100% happy with it, but I do think it'll turn people onto the book. I mean, I think it gets people excited when.
Yeah, and I particularly love the music you put to it, because that's what really helps to sell that kind of Western feel.
Yes. Although Anna von Hauswolf, I highly recommend if you guys like epic, witchy, big, bold music. She's awesome. She has a lot of power, a lot of feminine power.
That's awesome. Anything else you have coming up, or anything else that's on stands right now you want to tease?
So there's nothing on the stands. I haven't dropped a published work since 2018. But I don't know exactly when, and it's looking like it might be early 2022. But I do have a novella coming out. It's my first work of prose. I'm really proud of it. It's called Brood. I think Brood X is a cooler thing to say, but it's actually Brood 10. It's the Roman numeral 10. And I'm just happy with it. It's a horror thriller story, and I like to call it cicada exploitation horror. So I'm really excited about it. And that's there's a lot going on, but I think those are the only two things I can announce right now.
Fair enough. All right, everybody. Go give Josh a follow, and don't forget to wish him happy birthday. It's his birthday.
It's my birthday.
It's his birthday today as this is released. So record a little video of yourself singing happy birthday to Josh.
Oh my God. You don't have to do that.
Put it up on
cool.
Twitter.
It's cool. I'll be busy on that day anyway. So
fantastic. Well, Josh, always great to talk to you, man. It was good to see you when we had dinner. Hopefully we can do it again.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. I love it.
And to you listeners, thanks for joining us for Comic Source Bad Idea Takeover. As always, we really appreciate you listening and for all your support, and we'll talk to you next time.